The sharp sound of tearing fabric cut through the fitting room only 2 hours before the wedding. When the side of Madison's gown split open near her waist, several phones immediately turned toward her. The first woman everyone blamed was also the only person who rushed forward to shield her from the cameras. No one realized that forcing Elena Morales to kneel that day would uncover a secret buried for nearly 30 years. Madison had just stepped down from the fitting platform to record one final video when the tear appeared. Elena immediately grabbed the protective cloth from a chair and wrapped it around the bride's waist. "Please stop recording. Do not move or the tear may spread." Victoria Hale rushed in from the next room. She took one quick look at the broken seam and announced loudly, "Elena performed the final alteration." She did not mention the written warning Elena had submitted 3 days earlier. Madison's face turned pale. The wedding at a historic resort in Charleston had attracted media attention, and several bridesmaids were still secretly filming. "Did you sew it incorrectly?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger. Elena examined the torn edge with her gloved fingertips. "The stitches are still intact. The base fabric separated because it could not withstand the tension. Please give me 5 minutes to retrieve my warning report and the matching fabric sample." Nathan stepped forward and positioned himself between Elena and the phones. "Let her explain before anyone reaches a conclusion." That was the moment Madison could have stopped everything. But she saw the screen of a bridesmaid's phone recording the damaged gown and imagined the video spreading online before she even reached the aisle. She pointed toward the floor. "Get down on your knees and fix it, now." The room fell silent. "If you ruin this day, I will make sure no bridal shop in Charleston ever hires you again." Victoria handed Elena a sewing kit as though she had been waiting for that exact moment. "Every dollar of damage will be taken from your pay." Elena looked at the faces watching her. She did not beg, and she did not use anger to defend herself. She simply accepted the kit and said, "I will repair the gown, but please do not mistake my silence for an admission of guilt." She spread a clean piece of fabric across the wooden floor, then slowly lowered herself onto her knees while keeping the white train from touching the ground. Her fingers had stiffened with pain, but every stitch she removed was precise. She examined the separated fabric, then glanced toward a box with a sealed compartment containing her warning report and fabric samples that had been numbered in the sewing log. Leah stood beside the vanity table, her lips beginning to move. "Mrs. Hale, the roll of fabric that day—" Victoria immediately fixed her eyes on the young assistant. Leah lowered her head and swallowed the rest of the sentence. Victoria had just been given a chance to admit that the material had been replaced. Instead, she turned toward Madison. "Do not worry. We will deal with whoever is responsible." Nathan walked over and closed the fitting room door. "Everyone turn off your phones, right now." Madison shook her head. "No, I need evidence in case I have to sue the shop and Elena." Elena still did not look up. She removed the damaged seam, placed the intact thread beside the broken edge of the fabric, and began reinforcing the inner lining. When she needed to thread a smaller needle, she removed the thin glove she always wore in front of clients. Her sleeve slipped upward. Madison Sinclair, who was standing near the vanity table, suddenly dropped the hair clip in her hand. A long burn scar ran across Elena's wrist. A curved scar shaped like a half circle marked her right palm. And the little finger on her left hand was permanently bent and could not straighten. The voices in the room faded from Catherine's awareness. She no longer saw a seamstress kneeling at her daughter's feet. She saw a smoke-filled hospital hallway from nearly 30 years earlier. A young woman lay in a bed, with both hands wrapped in bandages. Those same hands had carried Madison, who was still a small child, through the window of a burning sewing workshop. Then the woman had gone back inside to rescue Catherine and two other employees. Catherine remembered the doctor saying that the woman's little finger would never fully recover. She also remembered holding those bandaged hands and promising that the Sinclair family would never forget her sacrifice. She took one step forward. "Tell me your full name." Victoria immediately interrupted. "Catherine, we do not have time for personal matters. The wedding is about to begin." Elena stopped moving the needle. She looked up, her eyes calm but completely unbroken. "Elena Morales." Catherine grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Madison stared at her mother, unable to understand why the name had left her speechless. "Madison, get out of that chair," Catherine said. "Turn off every camera." "Elena has not finished repairing the gown." "The gown can wait." Catherine stepped between her daughter and the seamstress, who was still kneeling on the wooden floor. "Madison, the woman you just forced onto her knees is the person who carried you through the window of a burning sewing workshop." No one moved. Leah covered her mouth with one hand. Nathan looked at Elena, then at the scars she had hidden for so many years. Madison stepped backward as every trace of anger disappeared from her face. But Elena did not smile. She showed no relief at finally being recognized. She simply placed the needle on the floor, looked directly at Catherine, and asked, "If you knew that I saved your daughter, why did the Sinclair family allow my name to remain on a blacklist for nearly 30 years?" Elena's question left Catherine speechless. Madison looked at her mother, then at the seamstress, still kneeling beside her feet, as though searching for some detail that would prove it was all a mistake. "Are you sure it is her?" Madison asked. Catherine stepped closer to Elena, her eyes fixed on the permanently bent little finger of her left hand. "The burn began at the wrist and curved into the palm. The doctor said this finger would never straighten again." Her voice broke. "I visited you in the hospital twice." Elena clearly remembered the young woman who had sat beside her hospital bed, held her bandaged hands, and cried. "You promised that the Sinclair family would never forget what I had done." Madison looked down. For the first time, she realized Elena was still kneeling because she had ordered her to. She stepped back, her face turning red with shame, but the apology remained trapped in her throat. Catherine reached out to help Elena. "Please stop. The gown is not worth making you continue like this." Elena looked at the fabric slowly separating beneath the lining. "If I leave it now, the tear may spread when Madison walks." She did not stand. It was not an act of submission. She simply refused to let the bride be exposed in front of hundreds of guests, even after Madison had humiliated her. Nathan locked the fitting room door and looked at the bridesmaids. "Put your phones down and hand them to me. No one is keeping this footage." Then he turned to Madison. "Stress does not justify humiliating someone before she is allowed to explain the truth." Madison did not argue. She stood still while Elena added a hidden layer of reinforcement inside the bodice. Each stitch passed through stiff, aching fingers, securing not only the damaged section, but every area that might tear next. Once the gown was safe, Elena removed a printed warning from the sealed compartment in her sewing kit. It included the date, the fabric roll number, and her conclusion that the bodice material could separate under tension. Victoria glanced at it and said coldly, "Anyone could create a document like that after the accident." "This copy was printed 3 days ago," Elena replied. "I also kept a matching fabric sample." Victoria refused to back down. "She is creating evidence to avoid responsibility." Leah burst into tears. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone. "Mrs. Elena did not create anything. She warned us in advance." Victoria spun toward her, but this time Leah did not lower her head. "You ordered me to remove the supplier label from the replacement fabric roll. I took a picture before I threw the label away." The time-stamped photograph clearly showed a roll number matching the one in Elena's warning. Victoria immediately changed her defense. "That fabric still met the required standard. If it tore, the problem was Elena's cutting and alteration work." Elena placed the thread she had removed on the table, then spread the broken edge of the fabric beside it. "If the seam had failed, the thread would have snapped or pulled loose. Here, the thread is still intact. The fabric itself split apart." Catherine called Thomas and demanded that he come to the resort. A few minutes later, he entered the room, irritated at being pulled away from the reception area. But when he heard the name Elena Morales, his expression changed. "I remember that case," Thomas said. "You received a large settlement and voluntarily left Charleston." Elena looked directly at him. "I received a small medical advance that covered only part of my hospital bill. After that, your family's attorney pressured me to sign a confidentiality agreement while my mother needed money for treatment. Soon afterward, no sewing shop would hire me." Thomas turned toward Catherine. "My father handled the entire settlement." "I asked you about Elena many times," Catherine said. "You always told me she had been fully taken care of." "I was a young executive at the time. Father gave me the documents to sign and said every claim had been resolved. I did not know there was a blacklist." Elena closed her sewing kit. "Choosing not to know is still a choice, Mr. Sinclair, especially when the person signing the papers has power and the person suffering the consequences does not." Someone knocked on the door. Rosa Bennett entered, carrying an old red folder against her chest. Elena had called her earlier because she knew Victoria might continue denying every warning. Rosa placed the folder on the table. "I kept the things they wanted us to forget." Inside were reports Elena had submitted about locked emergency exits, photographs of chains wrapped around the doors, and a burned time card bearing her employee number. 3 warnings had been filed before the fire, but each one carried the same note: "No action required." Thomas quickly turned through the pages, and his hands began to shake. Rosa removed a compensation payment record. According to the file, Sinclair Textiles had approved a large payment for Elena, but the receiving account did not belong to her. It belonged to an intermediary fund managed by the Sinclair family's attorney. "That money never reached me," Elena said. "I was only told that I did not qualify for anything more." The final page was a statement confirming that the case had been fully resolved. Thomas Sinclair's signature appeared at the bottom. Catherine placed the document in front of her husband. "You signed a statement saying Elena had been fully compensated. Did you know the money never reached her?" Thomas stared at his own signature but could not answer. Rosa slowly pulled another sealed envelope from the bottom of the folder. "This signature is not the worst part. Inside this envelope is the list of workers who were blacklisted, along with the name of the person who approved it." Rosa broke the seal. Inside was a blacklist containing the names of Elena, Rosa, and 9 other workers who had reported dangerous conditions at Sinclair Textiles. The final approval belonged to Richard Sinclair, Thomas's late father. Thomas exhaled, as though he had found a reason to lessen his responsibility. My father approved it. I did not create this list. Rosa placed a delivery record in front of him. But your office received a copy. Thomas studied the date, then slowly admitted that his father had described the attachment as an insurance document. Thomas had never opened it. Catherine refused to let the confession end there. You may not have created the wrongdoing, but our family benefited when the fire investigation was closed. Your ignorance cannot erase what Elena and the other workers suffered. Madison had put the gown back on after Elena saved it from tearing apart. But instead of walking down the aisle, she ordered the organizers to shut down the live stream and invite nearly 200 guests into the main hall. She could no longer allow the wedding to continue, as though no one had been forced onto her knees in the room behind them. At that moment, Victoria tried to leave the resort carrying a tablet and several folders of invoices. Nathan stopped her in the hallway. You have the right to leave, but all information connected to the contract must be preserved. He instructed security to back up the purchasing records without detaining Victoria or using force. Leah sent the photograph of the fabric label, the messages ordering her to remove it, and every related record she had saved to an independent attorney. The email backup quickly confirmed that Elena had submitted her warning on time. Victoria's account had deleted it from the shared folder. With no way left to deny the evidence, Victoria shifted the blame. Madison kept changing the design without increasing the budget. I had to find a way to control the costs. Madison looked down at the gown and understood for the first time that her seemingly harmless demands had placed pressure on people who had no power to object. I accept responsibility for the pressure I created, she said. But that did not give you the right to replace the material, delete the warning, and blame Elena. A few minutes later, Madison stepped onto the stage, wearing the gown repaired by the very woman she had humiliated. There was no entrance music and no promotional filming. In front of her family, business partners, and guests, she held the microphone with both hands. A few hours ago, I forced an innocent woman to kneel in front of me. I did it because I believed that money and status gave me the right to condemn her before hearing the truth. The hall became completely silent. Madison ordered that no footage of Elena's humiliation be used in the wedding campaign. She announced the end of her promotional partnership with Maison Victoria, then turned toward Elena. I'm sorry. I understand that you are under no obligation to forgive me today. Elena did not step onto the stage to turn the apology into a beautiful public reconciliation. An apology is a beginning, not an ending. Catherine publicly confirmed that Elena had rescued her, Madison, and 2 workers from the fire. But Rosa did not give the red folder to the Sinclair family. She handed it to an independent legal representative so the evidence would remain beyond the control of the people whose family had once concealed the truth. Thomas stood, his voice heavy. I will temporarily step down as chairman while every accident record and compensation fund is independently reviewed. I will have no role in directing the investigation. Sinclair Textiles later agreed to establish a restitution fund managed by a third party, contact every worker named on the blacklist, and correct Elena's public employment record. Victoria's wedding contract was terminated that same day. The investigation that followed forced Maison Victoria to refund multiple clients, pay wages that had been withheld from employees, and face a civil lawsuit for contract fraud. The Sinclair family offered Elena a private check as a gesture of gratitude. She refused it. I do not need a gift in exchange for another kind of silence. I will accept only the compensation determined through an independent audit, and a public correction of the record. Nathan told Madison that he would continue with the wedding only if she truly wanted to begin their marriage with accountability, rather than an attempt to rescue her image. Madison agreed to cancel the live stream, the brand sponsorships, and the elaborate performance they had planned. They held a simple ceremony where their vows were no longer treated as advertising content. Elena did not stay to become a symbol of the Sinclair family's redemption story. After checking one final time that the gown was secure, she packed her sewing kit and left the resort with Rosa. 6 months later, the compensation determined through a transparent review allowed Elena and Rosa to open a small cooperative sewing studio. They reserved part of their funding to train older or injured seamstresses, paid every worker clearly, and never withheld wages through confusing contract terms. Leah became their first apprentice. When their first finished piece was ready, she suggested putting Elena's name on the label. Elena looked at her scarred hands, then stitched the words, "Morales and Bennett, made by the hands named below." Underneath, she added the name of every person who had designed, cut, and sewn the garment. One afternoon, Catherine visited the studio without bringing reporters. She handed Elena the corrected report. It stated that the fire had been caused by locked emergency exits and officially recognized Elena Morales as the woman who had saved 4 lives. Elena placed the report beside her sewing machine and returned to work. She did not need the past to turn her into a hero. She only needed the past to stop treating her as the person at fault. Nearly 30 years earlier, Elena's hands had carried a child through the window of a burning workshop. On the wedding day, those same hands saved the gown of the woman who had just humiliated her. But her greatest victory was that from that day forward, no seamstress in Elena's workshop would ever have to work with anonymous hands. What would you have done in Elena's place? Would you have forgiven Madison on her wedding day, or waited for her to prove that she had changed through her actions? Share your thoughts and continue following Stewart stories, stories of love, hope, and justice.